Twitter says it has shut down more than 200 accounts that were tied to the same Russian operatives who bought political ads on Facebook. Of the 450 accounts released by Facebook as part of its investigation, Twitter was able to match 22 of them to its own site. The disclosure by Twitter followed a briefing by company officials to staffers of the Senate and House Intel committees yesterday. Following that meeting, the top Democrat on the Senate committee, Mark Warner, slammed Twitter for its presentation.
The presentation that the Twitter team made to the Senate Intel staff today was deeply disappointing. The notion that their work was basically derivative based upon accounts that Facebook had identified showed an enormous lack of understanding from the Twitter team of how serious this issue is, the threat it poses to democratic institutions, and again, begs many more questions than they offered. Their response was, frankly, inadequate on almost every level, and why their need to come forward in a public presentation and explain to the Senate and the American public becomes all that more important.
The top Democrat on the House Intel Committee, Adam Schiff, also weighed in on Twitter's briefing to his committee, releasing a statement that read in part, "It is clear that Twitter has significant forensic work to do to understand the depth and breadth of Russian activity during the campaign. This additional analysis will require a far more robust investigation into how Russian actors use their platform as a part of their active measures campaign." You do get the sense, Nicole, that Facebook, Twitter, social media was totally clueless about what was happening on their sites during the 2016 campaign.
It's worse than that, and you have to put Google in there too, because YouTube is another one that we're not talking about yet. But if you look at how when there's a terrorist attack, and they're always the smartest law enforcement people around this table, and they always talk about going to look for the digital footprint. That's because no one takes down any questionable material or activity until after the fact. The social media companies are sort of like the worst stereotype of a Republican political organization. They're reactive, they're opaque, they're defensive, they are very slow to understand the value of transparency. They're totally lawyered up, lobbied up, and they are, as a culture, the hubris of thinking that they're all about the public good, when if you take a low-tech analogy, it's basically like someone got mugged in your backyard, and their position is, well, it's not our problem. I mean, we just bought the lot on which the house was built.
There's a tremendous
not our
irony
problem.
with these guys, because the tech guys, these young, are the ones who are revolutionizing the world for betterment. Yet the irony is, if I want to take an ad out on NBC or anyplace else for a laundry detergent, the things I have to go through
it has to work.
to prove
it has to be real.
It's got 5% more blue crystals in it. Yet there is no there is nothing more important for us, for people watching this show over the next 10 or 20 years, as the regulations of these companies. They control the flow of communication. Now, what's happening here, I don't want to upset all the NBC people watching this, but what's happening here, as far as our power versus what's happening over here, multiply it 1,000-fold, and there is no regulation.
One difference, though, is that we have quality controls. We have standards. We are,
the FCC, right?
And they should be held to the same standards. They are essentially media companies operating as, you know, the dark internet.
They're media companies 1,000-fold.
So, Yamiche, you've got some new reporting for the New York Times about those racially divisive Russian ads on Facebook we learned about. What'd you find?
I found that Representative Robin Kelly essentially said that Facebook admitted to members of the Congressional Black Caucus, as well as a subcommittee on the House Oversight Committee, that there were ads that were targeting Black Lives Matter and targeting specifically ethnic groups and allowing people to target not only for Russian influence, but also target housing ads, employment ads. And that, to me, is where you get into the point where there could have been federal laws broken. But essentially, a lot of the members of the Congressional Black Caucus are fuming because they're saying that Russia actually exploited a lot of the racial divisions that already exist in America and used both Facebook and Twitter in this way to essentially make people hate each other more. So the question whether or not Facebook and Twitter actually understand what's going on. Robin Kelly wrote this letter to Facebook essentially saying we need you to engage more and we need you to be a lot more transparent. She said that the company's done some adjustments when it comes to the housing and employment ads, but when it comes to understanding how Russia influenced the presidential election, she wants to know a whole lot more, and Facebook essentially hasn't been doing that. So it's very important when you see someone like Mark Warner talking about Twitter kind of not understanding the scope of it, not understanding what's going on. It's because Facebook for a long time said, oh, no, we don't think that this is a really big issue. And now you have the founder of Facebook saying, you know what, I was wrong about that I should actually have taken this a lot more seriously.
Noah, Russian operatives have found in Twitter and Facebook the perfect hiding place, it seems. They get in easy. They can disguise themselves. People aren't who they say they are on social media. That's news to no one, but it's an easy way to disrupt an American election to the extent they did. What do these social media companies have to do right away?
Well, first, you probably have to know that Russian intelligence is going to exploit anything they possibly can to do precisely what she was talking about. This isn't new. This is the Kremlin playbook. They have been exacerbating racial tensions in the United States since there is a Russian intelligence organization. As recently as 2014, you had RT talking about police tyranny, and in Afro-Maidan, referring to the Ukrainian revolution that ousted the former Ukrainian president, Viktor Yanukovych. This is what Russia does. So if you're a media institution and you know that Moscow is going to target your audience, you have to be proactive and aware of that. And as you say, you had gatekeepers in most institutions. Institutions that are not, aware that they're going to be targeted are the most irresponsible, I would say. But I'm not sure that regulation is something that you can even entertain. This is about responsibility.
It's a convergence of some interesting things. So we know, for example, that white nationalists have really taken advantage of social media. In fact, they've expanded their reach by taking advantage of the platforms of Twitter and Facebook and Snapchat and a range of other things. And so here you have the kind of convergence of very hateful, mean-spirited people in our culture, right, using a platform. And then you have Russian operatives coming in and exploiting what they're already doing. And so here, and then you're at the nexus of protecting our democracy and protecting our commitment to free and open speech. And so these companies, when they try to kind of take the position of being high and mighty, they see themselves in some interesting sorts of ways as protecting, right, the ability of folk to say what they need to say. But we see underneath is all of this darkness, all of this ugliness that can be exploited.
There's some interesting intellectual debates to be had around all this stuff, to be sure. But these companies are American companies making a lot of money, dominating our lives, hiding behind a lot of intellectual arguments. And as the congressional members of both parties are saying publicly and privately, they are using lobbyists and PR executives and their own platforms to try to limit the disclosure that they make, to be accountable. American democracy is under siege, and they are hiding behind intellectual arguments.
And it's ongoing. I mean, they were involved, some of these Russian-linked Twitter accounts were involved last weekend in helping to sow hatred around the debate about the NFL. This isn't, we're not at a forensic stage where we're going to look back at what they did in 2016. We're not even there yet.
The bombs are still falling.
Right.
Yeah.
Wait, by the way, to what extent is there even a recourse?
We can regulate this. We start, instead of the FCC, it's the FTC, the Federal Digital Communications Company. And there is a body, a governing body there, a regulatory body, that when something like this happens, the economic consequence, the penalties in the hundreds of millions, you hit them in the pocketbook, they'll figure it out. And just so we understand the numbers here, NFL football, the highest rated show is 11 million viewers. We can find right now 20 idiots who are dancing on their head that have 40 million views on this thing. The numbers, the exponential difference of the reach versus traditional media is stunning.
I suppose there's any number of ways in which the federal government could target an institution that is a media institution that provides a platform for the exercise of the First Amendment. What is the limiting principle there? At what point are we targeting speech that we simply don't like?
Well, you can't yell, fire in a movie theater if it's not true.
You can if it's on fire.
Well, I think the point on Twitter is that some of these things are not true. And
that's incitement to violence is one
Twitter and Facebook have done nothing. I mean, money.
And it's extremely difficult to
Money has a seal so that we know when a dollar is real, when a dollar is counterfeit. There are groups that are trying to get the social media companies to have some sort of water seal or to verify the content, the veracity of it.
The government shouldn't be the recourse at first. It should be the boards of these companies.
What's clear is, though, we've only scratched the surface. I mean, seriously, I mean, these are the first, we're just at the beginning of this problem.
Our kids are going to figure it out, not us.
Well,
I mean, it's going to be
they better get moving
generation.
pretty quickly. All right, coming up next on Morning Joe, Congressman Steve Scalise summed up his return to Capitol Hill with 2 words: I'm back.
Wow.
His colleagues, however, weren't quite as succinct, giving the House Majority Whip an extended and well-deserved standing ovation. We'll show you a powerful moment on the House floor. Plus, golfer Phil Mickelson captured a selfie for the ages. We'll tell you what brought together 3 former commanders-in-chief. That is next on Morning Joe. Welcome back to Morning Joe. As the sun comes up over the United States Capitol, House Majority Whip Steve Scalise is back to work for the first time since nearly losing his life after being shot during practice for a charity baseball game in June. Scalise made a surprise return to Capitol Hill yesterday, tweeting out this photo of him and his wife with the simple caption, "I'm back." The congressman received a hero's welcome as he walked onto the House floor using crutches. He was met with thundering applause and a standing ovation, a few of them actually. Scalise thanked his fellow leaders for their support on his road to recovery.
You have no idea how great this feels to be back here at work in the People's House. As you can imagine, these last 3.5 months have been pretty challenging times for me and my family. But if you look at the outpouring of love, of warmth, of prayer, my gosh, Jennifer and I have been overwhelmed with all of that outpouring. Something else I saw firsthand wasn't a surprise to me, but it was the outpouring of love from you, my colleagues, both Republican and Democrat. It really does show the warm side of Congress that very few people get to see. And so I want to thank each and every one of you for that. You don't know how much it meant to me.
Congressman Scalise also took time to thank the 2 Capitol police officers serving on a security detail for saving his life. That's Crystal Griner and David Bailey. He also thanked Congressman Westrup, the Ohio Republican, Iraq War veteran, also a doctor who applied the tourniquet that saved Congressman Scalise's life and gave him the chance to get to the hospital where the doctors could finish the job. Yamiche, you were up on Capitol Hill yesterday. What was the mood like?
The mood was one of congratulatory, and it was one that felt, I think, very much like this is what America was based off of. It was based off this idea that Americans can rise above challenges, that even when political difference are put aside, that people can be genuinely happy for each other and genuinely celebrate life and genuinely celebrate the privilege of being able to serve your country as being a lawmaker. So it was a beautiful thing to watch. It was a beautiful thing to see. It reminded me of John McCain and when he walks around the Capitol and how people look at him, even the people that might be his political opponents, and really see him as someone who's an American hero. So I think in this case, people were very much celebrating his return, even if Democrats and Republicans alike.
You know, Nicole, I have to say, we haven't seen Steve Scalise. He looked great. I mean, he's got the crutches. He's in physical therapy. He's going to need some help getting around, but he looked and sounded really good.
I watched that story unfold on this show. You were all covering this live. You had interviews. You had information that was not available anywhere else, and it was one of the more terrifying mornings in recent history. And to see, and then we all had the updates from his office. They were pretty forthcoming about the medical setbacks along the way. So it really was sort of everything that you hope Congress could be when someone overcomes a challenge. But my God, what a divisive time in Congress. And there are divisions on both sides within each party. So I hope that mood carries over as they begin debating some of the things in front of them.
Actually, the irony is that the looming shadow behind this moment, of course, is Leader Pelosi came out almost immediately afterwards to decry efforts by the House leadership to put forward legislation to loosen gun regulations, and particularly regulations around gun silencers. So here we have the celebration, the embrace of Representative Scalise, and then underneath the shadow of partisan politics looms.
We did have that moment on June 14th, Noah, the day of the shooting, and then the days after where there was unity. We go through these bursts of unity in Congress, and they seem to evaporate, unfortunately, pretty quickly. But I don't think people fully appreciate, and maybe they did in the weeks after when we learned more, how close Congressman Scalise was really to losing his life. And thank God for those Capitol Police officers, the officers there in Virginia, and Congressman Wenstrup for saving his life.
How close we were to an epoch-defining moment in which we could have lost multiple Republican members of Congress by an assassin who was radicalized by politics. That would have been something that would have rocked this country to its core. We have no idea the kind of trauma we escaped.
Crystal Griner and David Bailey, those are the Capitol Hill police officers who saved Congressman Scalise's life. Another nice moment yesterday, golfer Phil Mickelson snagged this snapshot with Presidents Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama at the President's Cup tournament yesterday at Liberty National Golf Club in New Jersey. I actually had the honor of introducing each of them at the opening ceremony. It was the first time 3 presidents have attended the tournament since it was launched in 1994. The President's Cup, by the way, airs on the Golf Channel today, continues all weekend on NBC.
What was their mood? I mean, did they dish with you on their thoughts about anything going on in politics, or do they look to be joking amongst themselves?
No, they didn't get political, but what I was saying to you earlier is just watching them privately and not just the face they put on for the cameras, they get along. The 3 of them genuinely get along. The President's Club thing is real.
It's real.
And people that maybe you're not sure if does George Bush really like Barack Obama, does Barack Obama really like George W. Bush? The answer is yes, and you know this as well, that they really have a respect for each other. President Bush, and all the times I've been around him privately in interviews, always says the same thing. President Obama's a good man. Do we disagree on some things? Of course we do. It's America, but he's a good man and a good guy.
He loves you, so if he's going to gossip with anyone, it's going to be you. But I think that, so President Bush, 41, had the first relationship with Bill Clinton. They teamed up during George W. Bush's presidency to raise money for tsunami relief. So that friendship goes back almost 2 decades. And then I think Michelle Obama and Michelle Obama's mom, Mrs. Robinson, and George W. Bush bonded during the transition. And so I think that friendship has been building for more than a decade now, too.
I would ask our viewers at home the visceral reaction when you saw those 3 figures.
It's reassuring.
Versus the visceral reaction when you see our current president. Obviously, 3 figures politically couldn't be more divergent. Yet each one of them felt like almost comfort food when you looked at them in your body versus when Trump comes on the screen and viscerally your body tightens up.
And Trump's going to be there. People ask, where was Donald Trump? He's working, obviously. He's going to be there on Sunday at the tournament.
Sometimes he's just clicking through the cables.
Maybe he's watching the golf, too. But to your point, there were some chants in the crowd when they stood up expressing support for those 3 presidents. So, but it was a cool, it's a nice moment just to see those 3 men who are the most powerful men in the world and have different views on the world getting along so well.
It's always so amazing for me to kind of step back and watch those sorts of moments, because when you think about each one of them individually, I mean, they had to endure hell. So you think about what happened during the Obama administration, the kind of political arena, what was going on during George W. Bush's administration, what was happening during Clinton's administration. Almost each one represents an escalation of the dysfunction, right? And now we see them and we go, oh, when in fact, when we lived through it, they were going.
Because compared to now, as Tony said, it's all reassuring.
Right, which is really amazing.
And there's human decency throughout all 3 of those men.
That's
decent. Agree with them, disagree with them politically. Those were 3 incredibly decent human beings at their core.
Still ahead this morning, Jared Kushner has already been under the microscope for failing to disclose foreign contacts during his security clearance process. Now, the Senate Intel Committee says he may have forgotten to disclose something else.